And hi to everyone. Thank you very much for joining today for this session. So, my name is Nick Hickson, and I am a clinical scientist in genomics. My main role is as the scientific education and training lead for the Southeast Genomic Medicine Service and Synnovis. And I'm also an honorary lecturer at the University of Manchester, where I work with Professor Paul Shaw, who is an Associate Dean for Flexible and Digital Learning at the University of Manchester. Paul was meant to be my co-presenter today, but he had to last minute pull out due to a medical emergency. So I will do my best to cover some of his information as well, some of his slides. He was supposed to be my get out of jail card for when it comes to copyright issues and plagiarism issues, but we'll try and deal with that. Right, so this is just a quick overview of the session. So we'll have a brief introduction with the objectives of the session and a few disclaimers about the data privacy. Then thank you to all of you who completed the pre-workshop survey. It was approximately 100 of you, which is really good response rate. So I'll highlight some of the insights from that survey, and then we'll move on to a very brief explanation of what Gen AI is, what generative AI is. And we'll touch upon responsible uses in academia as well. And then we'll go to the main bit of the workshop, which is familiarization with some generative AI tools and some practical examples. And some of the main tools that we look at will be ChatGPT and Gamma, Notebook LM, and Claude. We will have a quick break, and then we'll move on to the second part, which is going through some of the limitations of Gen AI tools, followed by a quick hands-on activity. So if you've used some of the Gen AI tools before and you've already signed up, you'll be able to use this, or else you might be able to just do it on the spot then. And then there'll be a quick poll in relation to the presentation, and some sharing of some of the cases that you have actually shared through the pre-course survey as well, of examples of how you use the Gen AI tools for education and training purposes. And we'll have a Q&A session in the end with the Slido that Sally mentioned. So objectives for today: identify at least 4 relevant generative AI tools, understand some of the specific applications of Gen AI for learning and teaching in healthcare education and training, apply some basic prompting techniques to create some useful educational content, and then recognize some of the limitations of Gen AI tools in educational context. So a disclaimer here is that we always advise patient and organizational information should never be entered into Gen AI tools for any purpose, including educational tasks. So work email addresses, unless authorized by your employer, should also not be used when signing up to Gen AI tools. And I know several trusts in the NHS highlight that to staff members, and it's a type of blanket statement as well for all trusts. So this was the pre-workshop survey that, as I said, approximately 100 of you completed. And I'm just going to show some of the results briefly. So first question, what is your role? It's quite an even split between training officers and people in trainee posts, which is really nice to see. How often do you use these tools, the Gen AI tools? So some people have never used them. Some seem to be using them really regularly, a few times a week or even daily. So again, it's quite a spread across the different levels of experience of people attending today. Which types of Gen AI tools do you use? So the vast majority seem to use the chatbots such as ChatGPT, Claude, Google Gemini, but we've also got a lot of people dealing with AI detectors and writing assistants, as well as slide generators. How do you use generative AI? So summarizing information and personal exploration seem to be the main points there. but also to create instructional content and brainstorming, so generating ideas. In the other, so when you had the option to add any other, the vast majority of people seem to be mentioning coding in there, and coding applications of these GenAI tools. So another question was, what most excites or interests you about GenAI? And this is just a bit of a summary of the different categories that were identified. So speed and efficiency, so saving time on repetitive tasks in particular. Creativity, so helping with brainstorming and overcoming creative blocks. Learning and knowledge access, so acting as a personal tutor. Content development, so creating drafts for presentations or for documents or teaching materials. Organization summarization, so for example, summarizing literature. And inclusivity and accessibility, so this seems to also have been a point where these tools seem to be able to support individuals with language or learning challenges. Innovation and future potential, so enabling applications in healthcare. And also there's interest in the safe, obviously, use of these tools, responsible and plagiarism-free use. And this last question about what most concerns you about GenAI, and this seemed to be mostly about the information and how the information is generated. Is it accurate? How is it used? What's the data protection policies? Is it used ethically? Some quotes here: hallucinations leading to misleading information that is further propagated by students. I don't understand it, which is very understandable, because I don't think many people do, to be honest, how it actually works. And plagiarism issues and their environmental impact, so energy, water usage to produce all this data and train the GenAI tools on it. So on average, people didn't sit in the mid-level with regards to confidence of using these tools. So hopefully this workshop is pitched about that level as well. So as I said, I'm not going to go into much detail at all about explaining what generative AI is, because that's not really my field of expertise. I'm not a computer scientist. But this is a definition from Harvard University about generative AI. So generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that can learn from and mimic large amounts of data to create content such as text, images, videos, code, and the creation is based on inputs or prompts. So I then took this definition and put it into one of the generative AI tools to try and visualize this, and this is what it came up with. So you can see it's showing that it's obtaining the input of all the data, getting trained within the tool, and then outputting based on prompts after that. So video created by VO, which is a video creator from Google Gemini. So a few slides on the University of Manchester's position on AI. When used appropriately, these tools have the potential to enhance teaching and learning and can support inclusivity and accessibility. And this is actually really nice to see that it's also in line with a statement from the National School that was published recently, some guidance on the use of AI tools, which I'll also put a slide up about soon. The output must be treated in the same manner by staff and students as were created by another person. Another point is that you may use AI tools like any other resource to help you generate ideas, key themes, and plan your assessment. You may also cite or quote the content generated by AI systems. However, this is a very important point where passing off the work generated by AI as your own is plagiarism, and it will be treated as seriously as plagiarism of another person. So I am just showing some of the policies from the University of Manchester because that's who I also work with, but also because they deliver a large part of the STP training program as well. But similar policies should be in place at various other universities that you might be part of or dealing with. So acknowledging the use of an AI tool. So this could sit at the start of your work or be found in a footnote, and it would usually give an overview of the tools used and the outputs. So an example can be seen below for generative AI disclosure, where you literally state, I use ChatGPT version 3.5 to assist in idea generation. And then I also mentioned I use DALL-E, which is an image generator, to explore ideas for visuals. And you say where you cited it. So when it comes to referencing, if you use an AI tool and you use the product directly in your work, you will need to cite it. So there are specific guidelines as to how to cite it. And for example, in Manchester, if you're using Harvard Manchester referencing style, there's a specific option on how to reference under the software example. So one more slide about in-text citation. So this is just an example of how you can cite within the text when you're writing up. Give you a few seconds to read it. And then in your reference list, you can include that entry of using that tool. Now, I've got a couple of slides on Copilot Chat, mainly because the University of Manchester, this is the sort of approved Gen AI tool for use within the University of Manchester, and it also is the approved tool across most of the NHS at this point. So several trusts seem to have approved Microsoft's Copilot for use. So one of the main benefits is that it can be used safely as part of your studies or work in a way that's not necessarily true for other AI chatbots. So it's considered safe for academic use because the prompts and the files are private and protected like your email. It doesn't learn from your data. This is something, though, that you can also do if you configure the appropriate settings in other tools such as ChatGPT and Claude. Your data stays within the university environment unless you go onto the web, so unless you've enabled a web search. And any uploaded files will be in your OneDrive, and the session data is not retained. And of course, any personal or sensitive information, confidential information, should be handled according to GDPR. And this, I think this is the final slide on this topic about copyrighted or licensed materials. So the university's position is that you can upload materials onto Copilot if you have legitimate access to them, such as teaching materials from the university, papers from the library, etc. And this is just a slide to show a few more resources that are available through the university. I think they're accessible to everyone. A bit more about the policies, and also this is a nice interactive presentation using Genially, which is a nice online tool for creating presentations, and it's definitely worth a visit. This is the statement that I mentioned about from the National School of Healthcare Sciences, and it's definitely worthwhile reading through. Some really useful information in there, and really nicely written as well. So we'll move on to one of the main parts, the main part of the workshop now. So some Gen AI tools and some example uses. So the first example is how can we use a generative artificial intelligence tool to create educational presentations. So a lot of you will have done this already. You know, some of you may have never seen it. So we'll try and keep it relatively straightforward and basic to give you a good idea of what you could be doing. So here I'll be using ChatGPT plus another GenAI tool called Gamma. So this combination allows for creating some educational presentations on a variety of topics. So on this occasion, I've picked next generation sequencing, which is a technique and technology that's particularly useful in genomics. So the process is that you use ChatGPT. You could use ChatGPT or a different GenAI tool to generate an outline of key NGS concepts for different knowledge levels. You can then create a detailed prompt for educational content, and then you can take that output and input it into this other GenAI tool called Gamma, which specializes in slide generation. So, you know, prompts can be very short, but you most likely won't get what you're after. So, including specific detail in the prompt always produces much better outcomes. So this is an example prompt that I used. So I sort of assigned a role to the chatbot, to the GenAI tool as an expert educator and instructional designer, skilled in creating engaging educational content that effectively achieves the learning objectives. Task is to create the content for a slide deck, explaining next generation sequencing for, I said, biomedical science trainees. It could be healthcare science trainees, could be medical trainees. And then I highlight that you need to include key steps and a bit more detail, change the variety of each slide, including questions. And you can also ask it to include a description of potential images that you could be using. And then it's always important as well to give it a bit of a limit as to how extensively you want it to produce things like slides. So I said a maximum of 10 slides. So this is just going to be a quick demo of the process on a video. So this is in ChatGPT. I've taken this prompt that I just showed you. There is an option here called thinking, which I literally just showed there. But what that does is that it makes the chatbot, it takes longer to produce the material, but it goes a lot more in depth and does a lot more, let's say, research in the background. However, on this occasion, I've just used the fast version of it. Most of the GenAI tools now have that deep thinking or reasoning model options to them. So Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, they all have that now. But here I'm just showing the faster version, and obviously you need to use the deep thinking version when it's appropriate. And it tends to be used a lot for things like coding. So on this occasion, I'm just using this quick one. So you can see it's produced all the content for slides, slide 1, slide 2, and then I'm going into Gamma. So this is the other GenAI tool. So what I've done is I've taken the output from the first tool, so ChatGPT, and I'm going to paste it into this other tool. So I could have taken just the prompt, which is actually what I'm going to do here. I could have just taken the actual prompt and put it in here, or I could have taken the exact output generated from ChatGPT and put it here if I wanted to be very specific with what the input is. So I'll go here. I'm actually pasting the prompt rather than the output, but you could just paste the output generated from ChatGPT if you want to use that specific text. So here it's just going to generate via its prompt editor, and it does have its own GenAI functionality as well, Gamma. So it could just produce content based on a prompt. So generate. This is the free version, and I think you can only create up to 10 slides, and you can see it just goes straight into creating the different 10 slides. Fast forward it a bit. So it takes about 1 or 2 minutes to produce all this. And then you can see it's generated the slides with the relevant images in them, and you can just then go and download the content if you want to export it into PowerPoint, and it's ready to use as a template. Which you really need to, this is what I need to emphasize, is that I and nobody else should trust the output of these tools, because as we'll show in the next few slides, there's a lot of information that is just completely made up or completely wrong. So I would strongly recommend that you never just use the output of any Gen AI tool without reviewing it in a lot of detail. Right, so that was the first example. We've got a second example, which is about how do we summarize documents. So a useful tool for this is called Notebook LM, and it's part of Google's suite of tools. So this tool can help summarizing what I've used here is the tool to help summarize the current guidance documents on tools like on topics like plagiarism and the use of AI in healthcare education. So I found different documents from my own organization, from the national school, maybe from the Academy of Healthcare Sciences, from the University of Manchester, and I tried to summarize them all and see how I can navigate them. So I will show you exactly how it was done, but we, as I said, upload the documents, or you can paste document content in the platform. And then I'm going to showcase some key functionalities, such as how you can create a mind map through this Gen AI tool, or a deep dive conversation, which is actually a podcast. There are other capabilities as well, like briefing documents and quizzes that you can create through this. So at this point, I'm just going to have to share a different screen. So this one, hopefully you can all see it. And so here you can see on the left-hand side all the different documents. I've uploaded about 6 documents here in PDF format. It's taken them and it's summarized them for me. So there is a quick summary, but it can go into a lot more detail as well. It's quite a long document if you want it to be a long document. But one of the things that it's done, it's created this mind map for me. So you can see this is a summary of the first document. And if I want to see what is the actual definition of AI and Gen AI, I can click on it and it will then take me back to the relevant part of the document. The definitions, and it will tell me what document it is from as well. So that's a very quick example of how you can use a mind map to navigate through a collection of documents that you've summarized, and I have to say most of these documents are particularly long as well. So a different application that I also want to show is this podcast, which what it does, it's actually taken all the documents, it's summarized them, and it's created a 15-minute podcast with voices from 2 people who are discussing it. So I'll just share a minute of it for your interest, in case you've not come across it before.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today's deep dive takes us into quite a stack of documents, actually.
Yes, from several UK institutions. We've got the Academy for Healthcare Science, University of Manchester, the National School of Healthcare Science, Institute of Biomedical Science, and Synnovis too.
And we're looking at their guidance on something, well, really current and frankly crucial. It's the use of generative artificial intelligence, AI. and how it bumps up against academic and professional integrity.
Specifically around plagiarism, that's the big one.
Exactly. So our mission today is to kind of cut through all the detail, pull out the key bits you need to understand the rules, the risks, and what's expected when you're using AI in these settings.
And this
So that gives you a bit of a taste of what this entails. And I'll share my screen again. And it actually recently been updated, and now you can actually talk to the hosts of the podcast and interact with them as well. I think that's only been available in the past month or so. So that was a second example. A third example is what I actually applied to create this workshop. So how can we create a workshop outline and help create some of the content? So the main tool I used for this was Claude. This is part of the company called Anthropic AI, similarly to how ChatGPT is part of OpenAI. So Claude, I wanted to act as an AI assistant that can help generate workshop outlines and educational content specifically for healthcare training. So this was the initial prompt that I used. I wanted to act as an experienced health professions educator, so assigning it a role. I gave the duration of the educational session. I said about an hour. Then I specified what the audience was likely to be, so trainee healthcare scientists and trainers. I gave a bit more information about the audience so that it can be pitched to the right level. And then I wanted to state also what the main aims would be. Quite importantly, I also include this statement in the end to ask the tool to ask me questions as it goes along, one at a time, to gather additional information. So Claude is particularly good as a conversational tool, and that is why I chose to use Claude for this. I've got a link to the output example there, but I will again have to share a different screen just to give you an idea of how it worked. So this is the environment of Claude. Right at the top here is the initial prompt that I use. Then you can see we go into an actual discussion. So it's asking me to what I need to create it, and what do I think the background knowledge will be. So I'm just saying I don't know, but I assume it's very basic. And it keeps asking me questions, and I'm specifying what tools I want it to use, but you can see that discussion went on for quite a while in order to try and get a decent output out of it. And then it gives you a layout of what the presentation could look like, and then you can either try and produce a presentation through this or use tools like Gamma that I used, that I showed you previously. So going back to the presentation, that was the other example. So I think at this point, it looks like I'm going a bit fast through the slides, but I think we can have a very quick break for 5 minutes. And this is it looks a bit random what's stated there, but this was the first time I created a video using a generative AI tool, and this was not on the top of my list of what I would like it to create, but that was the top of my list of my 4-year-old daughter when I asked her what video should I create. So she wanted a video of a mermaid riding a unicorn in a sea of marshmallows, and we used a Google Gemini VO tool to create that, and this was the output, which I was very impressed by, and especially as it was the first video I've ever generated. So I think at this point we'll just take 5 minutes as a break, if that's okay, Sally, and then we'll just come back for the latter part.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay, I'll see everyone in 5 minutes, around 35 past. Right, I think we'll keep going, if that's okay.
That's great, yeah.
Right, good. Right, so this section of the workshop, I want to talk about limitations of generative AI tools, and it would be useful if you can interact a little bit on this this point. So this is an image which was generated by AI using the prompt, create an image of a high school science teacher teaching. And I've taken this from actually a course I went on from a company called AI for Education. So why I'm showing this image to see whether in its generation there was bias from the Gen AI tool. So if you want to put your hand up or add a comment in the chat of any suggestions of why you think there might be bias in this image, or why you think there may not be bias. Yeah, I can see some people putting in the chat. So about the gender, so this is reinforcing the stereotype that it has to be that a science teacher is a male, white male, ethnicity as well. Yeah, white male. So another thing that lack of ethnic diversity. Yeah, that's a really good point within amongst the students. There's also the fact that he's, there's lack of sizes and shapes of people in the image. The lab actually looks, the classroom and the lab looks really nice and quite well equipped, but it's not necessarily representative of all school classes and labs. So it is reinforcing some stereotypes, and it's also I'm also not sure what he's looking at, if I'm being honest, the teacher. But there are some elements of bias in there. So gender bias, racial bias, appearance and body type bias, and even the classroom setup bias. The good thing is that Gen AI tools are much better now at getting rid of bias. But often you need to prompt them to do that, to review their output to exclude that type of bias. So another major issue is, which I always have to stress this as much as possible, the scientific accuracy and the references used. So it can all the Gen AI tools can generate plausible sounding but incorrect or even fabricate information, as well as references and citations. And the term used for this is hallucinations. So the Gen AI tools are hallucinating. So this happens because these models, like one key thing to take about how these models work is that they predict what might happen. They predict what text is likely to follow, rather than accessing a verified knowledge base. So it's a very simplified version is, how you use your phone and you got your predictive text, and I'm sure everyone's experienced that you're trying to put something in your text and then something completely irrelevant comes up or inappropriate and you've already hit send. But in a very simplified way, that's how these tools can also work. And the other thing is the currency of the information. So a lot of the models, especially the free models, have knowledge cutoffs. So they may have taken information from the internet, but it was a year ago. So it is always, you can always check this as well when you're using a Gen AI tool. You could even just ask it whether it's outdated, or you can ask it what happened in the news today as a quick check to see how up to date it is. So as I said, always verify the scientific content with trusted sources before using in any educational activities. And plagiarism, you have to always, just like before AI, you have to be able to defend whatever you write, and you should never pass it as your own writing, because that is plagiarism, whether it's AI or not. A bit more here about the hallucinations and the misinformation from some of the tools. So this was a study from about 3 weeks ago, or actually a month ago now, and it was the largest study of its kind, looking at AI assistants and how they misinterpret news content about 45% of the time, apparently. And this was a study, the largest study that has been undertaken in this field, and it was by the European Broadcasting Union and was led by the BBC. Some of the key findings were that 45% of all the AI answers had at least one significant issue. And they did use all the, these Gen AI tools that I've mentioned, like Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, and concerningly, they found that 20% of the outputs had major accuracy issues, including hallucinated details and outdated information. And they did actually highlight Gemini, which is Google's Gen AI tool, performed worst with significant issues in 76% of the responses. So, and this is, now when you do a Google search, most of the time you get a Gemini output, which is a generative artificial intelligence generated output. So, you always need to be aware of that. And following that, a few weeks later, so on the 18th of November, Google CEO also came out and saying that you should definitely not blindly trust what AI tells you. So that's Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google. So at this point, it would be good if you've been using, ChatGPT and Claude regularly. This is probably a bit too basic for you, but still worth having a go. So if it's your first time using it, I'm not entirely sure whether you'll need to sign up or not. But as I said, if you do sign up, don't do it with your work email. But you could use ChatGPT for this, Claude, Gemini. You could use Copilot as well, so you wouldn't need to sign up for it. So you could put in a basic prompt like explain PCR. So I've just put PCR, polymerase chain reaction, just because it's relevant to genomics, but you could put something else from your own field as well. So one thing you could do is, if you do that now, you can just check the output, see how long it is, how detailed it is. You could also do it between two of the tools. So you could do it with ChatGPT and Claude and then compare the outputs. They can be very different, and they usually are. And this is a very, very basic prompt, as basic as it gets, really. So, but then what you can do is that you can re-prompt the tool and maybe give a more enhanced prompt. So you can give a prompt as detailed as this one, where again you assign a role. You say what the level is, so A-level students. The explanation should be targeting A-level students. I've asked it to include a simple analogy to help understand the concept. Why is it important? Common applications, and I've told it to keep the explanation under 300 words. And this is something that I always do now as well, where I ask it to review for completeness, clarity, and accuracy before the final output. And I do find that it tends to improve the output. So I don't know if any of you have tried that, and if you've got anything you'd like to comment on with regards to the output, if you found any significant differences between tools or between the two different prompts. If not, this is something you could just try out, especially if you've not used any Gen AI tools before. So I'll give a few seconds in case anyone wants to comment on their output. Okay, doesn't look like there's any comments, so we can just move on to the next slide. So I'm just going to show some other example uses for of these tools for education and training purposes. So this is something we've been doing recently in our Teams as well. So using Microsoft Teams, if you've got the upgraded version, which is a paid for version, you can get a recap function. So if you're doing a webinar, for example, so let's say I was recording this myself, at the end of the recording, there's a recap function which you can use to edit the whole recording, but it also gives you a really nice summary of the main points of the session, broken down really nicely and follow-up tasks. So it's in a sense like taking minutes, but it's really, really good. There are some errors, so you always need to check the output, but I find it's really good, especially in the paid version. If you don't have the paid version, you can literally just take the transcript if you want, and you can then put it into Copilot chat to create that summary. So the prompt that I give to Copilot, and I do use Copilot for this because I want if it's an educational seminar that we're delivering within the department, I want it to stay within the department, whatever information I'm using. So again, I'm assigning a role, expert educator. I'm asking it to create 10 multiple choice questions, assigning the level, so BSc level, and make sure you cover as many parts of the webinar as possible. And then again, this is almost like a internal quality control aspect where I ask it to think thoroughly about the questions before creating them and review the output. So I've put that into Copilot. It comes back to me for a bit of a chat, and it's created then two documents, one with 10 multiple choice questions and one with the model answers for it. So this is an example of some of the questions you may have created. So this is from a very recent talk that we gave about registration for genetic technologists, and we've got the listed multiple choice questions there. And then it will also provide a separate document which has the answers. So what I do then is in one folder that's accessible by all staff, I'll put the recording in, I'll put the summary of the main points that have been AI generated. I'll put a disclaimer that it is AI generated. I will review it briefly, but then I'll also include these two files with the multiple choice questions and answers. And if anything, I actually go through these and I find them useful as a revision method to see what I got out of the talk and what I understood. And a lot of the content of what we deliver on webinars is very scientific and it is on particular topics. So I find that this kind of summary and the multiple choice questions and answers can be useful for, eventually for when you're going to sit some type of professional exam, for example, or even as part of revision for your STP training. But as I've been stressing, it always needs to be reviewed with caution and always get the relevant resources right to make sure the information is accurate. So one more example from myself. So this is about gamification of learning. So trying to make learning as enjoyable as possible, I guess, and in a format of a game. So this is something I've just been exploring very briefly lately. So I've used Claude to create a little online game. So it could be called anything as mutational mayhem, genetic fixer, mutation detective, all sorts of names. So this is a game where the player learns how DNA mutations can affect protein structure basically, and the amino acids involved in the protein. So there's a progression system to the game. So you can start with simpler mutations and progress to more complex ones. And you can also have a reward system. So points for correct answers, achievement badges like Frameshift Master or whatever you want to call it. So I will now switch screens just to show you what that looks like. So you can see I've been putting my prompt in here. You can actually just put a screenshot in as a prompt, and it usually works as well. So you don't need to actually type it all in. So there's been a discussion here about what I want the game to look like, and this is what it's going to then look. You can share the link out to students, for example, and they can play. It's got the different levels, and then you'll say start mission. So I've got my original mRNA sequence here. I've also got a codon chart up there, which I can actually click on, which is like almost like my cheat sheet in a sense, which tells me, these 3 nucleotides lead to this amino acid, code this amino acid. So if something changes, then I have to go and see what the changed amino acid would be. So if it was a UUU, that codes for a phenylalanine, but if then it changed to a UCU, it'd code for a serine. So that's the cheat sheet there. So this is the original sequence. You can see the different amino acids here, and then a cosmic ray has been detected, which leads to a mutation. So this is the mutated sequence, and you can see there how the nucleotides have changed. The amino acids of the protein have also changed. So originally it was met, cis, now it's met, threonine, which is a different amino acid. So the question is, what type of mutation is this? So I'm going to say this is a missense mutation and submit my answer. Correct. Great. So I move on to the next question. I'm still on level 1. Got 6 questions to answer. This is my second one. I've got a score of 100 so far. So this is again the next question. Similar process. Let's say I'll call this a nonsense mutation. That's an incorrect answer. So it gives you a bit of feedback. This is a silent mutation. So I'll do that, and then that will move to the next one. And this is how it's going to work. And then the questions can become increasingly harder. And when I achieve certain scores past the first level, I'll get a badge. I'll get some more detailed feedback. But I spend about 10 minutes creating this, so I've not actually thought it through in any detail, but it just shows the coding capabilities of these tools, and I do particularly find Claude to be very good at producing this kind of output. Right, going back to my slides. So at this point, I just want to share some some examples that you have actually shared through the pre-workshop survey, and also some examples that some of our own trainees have also shared. So the question on the survey was, have you got any examples to share of how you have used GenAI for education training purposes in your department? So I've got a few quotes here. So use for a final year assessment, case-based scenario ideas. So this is with regards to the SDP. Mostly people seem to be using ChatGPT. I copied parts of the curriculum and asked for questions based on this. Mostly about professional practice, then discussed in groups of students and assessed the validity of answers. So that I found this really interesting because this is an activity that students are doing in groups as well, which is really good from an educational point of view, and they're using this to create and get feedback, continuous feedback. And this is one of the aspects that they actually highlighted, that they liked the way the feedback was structured. So they would highlight something positive, something negative, what they could improve, and also provide a model answer. But they did always go back and check for validity and accuracy of the information provided, which you would expect, especially when it comes to experienced students like STPs in their final year, preparing for the final year assessment. This is just an example of a question that I'm guessing was ChatGPT came up with. So you're working in a lab when a colleague tells you they've accidentally reported results for the wrong patient. The report has already been uploaded to the hospital system and sent to the clinical team. What would you do in this situation? So quite a good question for the professional practice module. You know, then the student would go in, type the response, and there'd be feedback, continuous feedback on this, what they could improve, what they answered well, what they answered poorly. And then the students would also discuss this in groups between them. Another scenario here, you're on a lunch break in the cafe, you overhear two colleagues from your department discussing a recent complex patient case. They're mentioning patient information. What would you do? Again, a very valid question, very useful question. So going to the case sharing, so to the pre-workshop survey, these are just some these examples that you shared when completing the forms. So I've just selected some of them. So explaining and deconstructing complex subjects, such as, this is again genetics, genomic specific nonsense mediated decay, but how can you explain them in a understandable way for yourself, but also to explain to somebody else? Generating questions for feedback after delivering a course. You deliver a course, so if I was delivering this workshop today, then I would put a question, try and put a questionnaire in the end, and maybe I've used GenAI tools to help me create some relevant questions. I will have told the GenAI tool what it's about, the content of the workshop, what I want to get out of it, and then you can suggest some questions that I'll review. When using Excel and having trouble data analyzing, I describe the issue to AI for steps to a solution. I've done this as well, where you're trying to generate a specific formula maybe for a specific functionality in Excel. Asking ChatGPT to explain code line by line and explain errors. I've never tried that, and I wouldn't even know what it's talking about if it starts talking in code. But obviously it would be useful potentially for bioinformatics students or somebody with coding experience. Using Google LM, so this is Notebook LM, to create case studies by uploading the module descriptors, then amending them as required. And creating mock exam questions for trainees by feeding the STP curriculum into ChatGPT. The questions were then edited and approved by a team of registered scientists. So those were some of the questions. So I've got a quick Mentimeter poll here. If you would like to either scan the barcode or go to menti.com and just put this code in. Whoops. I'll give you a few seconds to get there. Okay. Wait 1 second. Okay, so can you actually see this, Sally?
The slot, yeah. The
Yep.
results, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So first question, which two aspects of your work do you think GenAI tools could help with the most? Quite a good spread here. Summarizing papers, designing presentations, developing assessment questions. Yeah, not much on trainee feedback. But yeah, these are really common uses, and at least at this point seem to be some of the most popular uses of generative AI tools. So I'll just move on to the, oh, sorry, I don't know if, yeah, if you can answer the second question now. So what follow-up activities would you be most interested in? So this is if there was a different workshop, for example, what would be useful to cover? So would it be things like a shared space for participants to contribute examples of GenAI use? Whether that would be something like on Futures or some other platform. Follow-up workshop for those interested in additional applications, and list of GenAI resources. So yeah, workshop and the list of GenAI resources quite popular. The thing with GenAI resources is that so those can be, I've got a decent selection I could share, but I often find that it's good to have educational material and resources, but it's about finding the time to use them or have somebody sort of show you how to use them. And I find myself just adding more and more to my list of things to visit and use because I think they seem great and exciting. But yeah, this is something that we could I could coordinate as well. Great, right, so move on to the third question. So which two areas would you like to focus on learning more about using GenAI tools? Okay, so still summarizing, scientific literature is very popular. Generating assessment as well, and that is quite an interesting field, and that would be something that I would find very interesting for a follow-up session. And I know Professor Paul Shaw, who, as I said, was meant to be presenting with us today, is doing quite a bit of work on as well, and that is a big important field that obviously organizations are trying to address, how to use appropriate assessment that may accommodate use of GenAI tools, and you know, combat the issue of potential plagiarism, whether that's intentional or unintentional. So great, this is really useful information that I can take back as well. So quite a good spread, yeah. Great, thank you very much. And I think this might be the last one. What would help you implement GenAI tools in your department? I think this is meant to be like free text, so. Yeah, workshops definitely, guidance. So most organizations seem to be picking up on that. Education is crucial, both for trainees and trainers, especially. I think education on how to use such tools, how not to use these tools. So that is obviously very important to everyone on the call. Yeah, firewalls, so IT issues. There'll be licensing issues. Perfect. But workshops, education, and guidance seem to be the hottest topics there.